April 23, 1943. North Atlantic, 400 miles southeast of Iceland. Through the spray-soaked periscope of U-230, Kapitänleutnant Werner Hahn watched what should have been impossible. The convoy had turned. Not randomly, not by chance, but precisely turning away from his attack position before he had fired a single torpedo. In the cramped control room, Hahn's executive officer, Oberleutnant Klaus Richter, whispered the question every man was thinking. Herr Kaleun, they cannot see us. We are submerged. The periscope exposure was less than 10 seconds. Hahn didn't answer immediately. He had commanded U-230 for 18 months, completing 5 successful patrols that had sent 43,000 tons of Allied shipping to the bottom. Just 6 weeks earlier, he had achieved what few commanders could claim, capturing 6 merchant vessels intact in a single patrol, through skillful maneuvering that forced their surrender without firing a shot. He had been decorated, promoted, and held up as an example of U-boat excellence. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But in this moment, watching the convoy execute a coordinated evasive maneuver with mathematical precision, Hahn experienced the first cold touch of technological obsolescence. He didn't yet understand what he was witnessing. Within hours, he would. And the knowledge would spread through the U-boat force like a depth-charge concussion, shattering the confidence of men who had believed themselves masters of the Atlantic. The weapon that had defeated Hahn before he could even attack was invisible, silent, and represented a technological revolution that German naval intelligence had catastrophically underestimated: shipborne centimetric radar. The capture of 6 Allied vessels in February 1943 had been the pinnacle of Werner Hahn's career. Operating southwest of the Azores, he had intercepted a scattered convoy whose escorts had been drawn away by a wolf-pack attack 200 miles north. The mathematics of naval warfare had favoured the bold, and Hahn was nothing if not bold. The first vessel, the British freighter Lancastrian Pride, had surrendered after U-230 surfaced within 600 metres, her deck gun trained on the freighter's bridge. Hahn's carefully rehearsed English, delivered through a megaphone, left no ambiguity. "Stop engines. Abandon ship immediately. You have 5 minutes." But Hahn hadn't sunk her. In a decision that would later seem impossibly naive, he had placed a prize crew aboard and sent her sailing toward occupied France. Over the next 6 days, he repeated this feat 5 more times. 2 Norwegian tankers, a Greek cargo vessel, an American Liberty ship, and a Dutch freighter, all captured intact, all sent toward European ports under German command. 3 of the 6 vessels actually made it to Brest and Saint-Nazaire. The propaganda value was immense. Goebbels' ministry produced newsreels showing captured Allied ships sailing into French ports under Kriegsmarine ensigns. Hahn was summoned to Berlin, received the Knight's Cross from Admiral Dönitz personally, and was told his methods represented the evolution of U-boat warfare beyond mere destruction to strategic capture. In his leather-bound war diary, Hahn wrote with characteristic precision, "The capture protocol demonstrates U-boat supremacy. When properly executed, the psychological advantage of surface threat allows acquisition of intact vessels and cargoes. The enemy fears our boats more than death itself." Kapitänleutnant Horst Vedder, commanding U-315, wrote to Hahn after reading the patrol report, "Your captures prove we have achieved such dominance that Allied merchant crews surrender rather than fight. This is the mark of victory, when the enemy's will breaks before battle begins." The celebration obscured a deeper reality that a handful of intelligence analysts had begun to notice. In Hahn's own report, buried in the technical appendix, was a troubling detail. During the final capture, before abandoning their vessel, the British radio operator transmitted continuously for approximately 40 seconds. Despite our jamming attempts, the transmission continued until the operator departed his post. That 40-second transmission would prove more significant than the captures themselves. It had been a radar contact report. German naval intelligence had known about radar since 1939. Early British sets operating on meter wavelengths could detect surfaced U-boats at ranges of several miles under optimal conditions. The response had been tactical. U-boats would run submerged more frequently, surface mainly at night, and maintain strict radio silence when escorts were detected. By 1942, German U-boat command had developed countermeasures. The Metox receiver, nicknamed the Biscay Cross for its distinctive cross-shaped antenna, could detect radar transmissions and give U-boats warning to dive before aircraft approached. Kapitän Zur, C. Günther Hessler, Dönitz's son-in-law and chief of operations, wrote in a November 1942 assessment, "While radar presents tactical challenges, our electronic warfare capabilities and operational doctrine have mitigated the threat. The enemy's radar operates on known frequencies. We can detect their detection." This confidence rested on accurate intelligence about British meter-wave radar. What German intelligence had failed to detect was a revolution in radar technology taking place in British and American laboratories. The development of the cavity magnetron in 1940 had enabled centimetric radar operating at wavelengths of 10 centimeters instead of several meters. The difference was not merely technical, it was paradigmatic. Centimetric radar could detect a submarine's periscope or snorkel at several miles range. More critically, it operated on frequencies that the Metox receiver couldn't detect. U-boats, equipped with their warning receivers, would receive no alert before being caught on the surface by aircraft or escorts equipped with the new radar. Oberleutnant zur See Hans-Joachim Werner, a signals officer at U-boat headquarters, later described the intelligence failure. "We knew the British were researching shorter wavelength radar. Our own scientists said such radar would require equipment too large and power-hungry for shipboard use. We believed our technical assessment more than we believed reports from the Atlantic. That belief killed thousands of our men." The first reports of unexplained detection came in late 1942, but they were fragmentary and easy to dismiss. Kapitänleutnant Siegfried von Forstner, commanding U-402, reported in October. Aircraft appeared without warning despite Metox receiver showing no transmissions. Forced to crash, dive while fully surfaced, bombed while submerging. Minor damage. Possible equipment failure. Korvettenkapitän Peter Ali Kremer, commanding U-333, reported similar incidents in November. Destroyer appeared from fogbank and attacked immediately, despite no radar warning. Either they have developed silent radar or possessed extraordinary luck. Given their general competence, the former seems unlikely. That final sentence captured the fatal arrogance that pervaded U-boat command. The British and Americans, repeatedly characterized as technologically inferior, couldn't possibly have made such a breakthrough. More likely, Metox receivers were failing, or crews were becoming careless. Kapitänleutnant Werner Hahn, commanding U-515, provided more detailed observations in January 1943. During surface transit at night, destroyers altered course directly, toward our position from 15 kilometers distance. No moon, moderate seas, visibility poor. Metox showed no transmissions. Either they saw our wake through supernatural vision, or they possessed detection capabilities we do not understand. Recommend immediate technical investigation. The recommendation went unheeded. U-boat headquarters, focused on the tonnage war and the massive convoy battles of early 1943, treated these reports as anomalies. After all, U-boats were still sinking ships. The monthly totals remained impressive. The mathematics of the war ships sunk versus ships built consumed all analytical energy. Radar, if it was improving, was merely another tactical challenge to overcome. Werner Hahn's encounter on April 23 shattered this complacency. His patrol had begun with confidence. U-230 was equipped with the latest Metox receiver, her crew was experienced, and Hahn himself was riding the reputation of his capture successes. Operating in the North Atlantic convoy routes, he had detected convoy HX-234 through hydrophone contacts and careful analysis of merchant radio chatter. The approach had been textbook. Submerged during daylight, Hahn positioned U-230 ahead of the convoy's predicted track. At dusk, he would surface, use his superior surface speed to achieve an optimal attack position, then dive and strike at night when visual detection was impossible. At 1800 hours, Hahn ordered U-230 to periscope depth. His watch officer, Oberleutnant Richter, swept the horizon through the attack periscope. Convoy bearing 270, range approximately 12 kilometers. Count of 30-plus ships, 4 escorts visible. Conditions perfect for attack. Hahn took the periscope. Through the lens, he could see the convoy, a massive formation of merchant ships, their hulls low with cargo, steaming in organized columns. The escorts were visible as small shapes on the formation's periphery. In his mind, the attack geometry calculated itself automatically. Surface after dark, run ahead at 17 knots, submerge at optimal position, fire full spread. Surface when dark, prepare for attack run, Hahn ordered. 2 hours later, with night fully established, U-230 surfaced into moderate seas. The diesels roared to life, fresh air flooded the boat, and the bridge watch took their positions. Hahn stood in the tower, binoculars scanning the horizon. Behind them, perhaps 20 kilometers back, the convoy lights visible despite blackout regulations showed their position. Ahead full. Course 285, Hahn commanded. The hunt was beginning. For 90 minutes, U-230 ran on the surface, her diesels driving her ahead of the convoy. Hahn monitored the METOX receiver personally. Silence. No radar transmissions detected. The night remained theirs. At 21:30 hours, Hahn ordered a course change to intercept the convoy's track. In another 20 minutes, they would dive and begin their attack approach. He could already imagine the torpedo spread, perhaps 6 ships in the first salvo. Then, without warning, the convoy turned. From the bridge, Hahn watched through binoculars as the formation's lead ships began altering course. Not 1 or 2 vessels making independent maneuvers, but the entire convoy executing a coordinated turn away from U-230's position. Kaleun, the radio operator called up from below. I'm receiving increased Allied transmission traffic. Sounds like contact reports. Hahn felt his stomach tighten. METOX status? Still silent, Herr Kaleun. No radar contacts. The convoy was now turning 30 degrees to port, opening the range. An escort destroyer on the formation's flank had increased speed, and was... Alarm! Hahn shouted, even before the lookout could scream the warning. Destroyer! Port bow! 4,000 meters! U-230's crew exploded into crash dive. Procedures. The bridge watch tumbled through the hatch. Hahn took one last look. The destroyer was coming directly at them, bow wave visible even at this distance, then dropped through the hatch and sealed it himself. Chief, take her deep, flood negative, full dive on the plains. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The boat nosed down into the black water. Around Hahn, the crew moved with practiced efficiency, but their faces showed the fear. How had the destroyer known? How had it found them? The first depth charges exploded at 2200 hours. For 3 hours, the destroyer and her companions worked over the area where U-230 had been spotted, dropping nearly 60 depth charges. Several exploded close enough to throw men off their feet, shatter light fixtures, and spring small leaks in the pressure hull. Through it all, Hahn sat in the control room, calculating and recalculating. The convoy had turned before the destroyer attacked. They had known U-230's position before visual contact was possible. The METOX receiver had detected nothing. There was only one possible explanation. They can see us? Hahn said quietly to Richter. On the surface, in the dark, in weather like this, they can see us. Not with eyes, with something else. Radar, Herr Kaleun? Richter's voice was barely a whisper. Radar that we cannot detect. That much is certain now. When U-230 limped back to Saint-Nazaire 18 days later, having sunk nothing and nearly destroyed herself, Hahn's patrol report created immediate alarm at U-boat headquarters. His description was precise, technical, and damning. Convoy executed coordinated evasion maneuver at approximately 21:30 hours on April 23rd. Course change was away from U-230's position before attack could develop. Matok's receiver detected no radar transmissions throughout the incident. Destroyer attack followed within minutes, demonstrating enemy possessed accurate knowledge of our position despite darkness and moderate visibility. This was not chance detection. This was not superior seamanship or luck. The enemy possesses radar capability that our detection equipment cannot identify. If this capability is widespread, surface attacks are no longer viable. The fundamental tactics of U-boat warfare have been negated. Kapitän Zur, C. Günther Hessler read the report in his office, overlooking the submarine pens at Lorient. His initial reaction, recorded in his diary, was disbelief. Hahn is an excellent commander, but this report suggests technological capabilities beyond British or American capacity. More likely, Matok's failure, possible Allied direction finding of our radio transmissions, or most probable simple unfortunate chance. In the same week, 8 other U-boats returned with similar accounts. Kapitänleutnant Wolfgang Luth, commanding U-181, reported being depth-charged by aircraft that appeared without any warning from our detection equipment. Korvettenkapitän Reinhard Suren, commanding U-564, described a destroyer attack that began before visual detection should have been possible in the prevailing conditions. The accumulating evidence demanded investigation. The truth about Allied centimetric radar emerged gradually through multiple intelligence sources. German agents in Spain reported that British and American warships were being fitted with new radar equipment featuring notably smaller antennas than earlier systems. A captured RAF pilot, shot down over France, mentioned during interrogation that Coastal Command aircraft now carried radar that could detect a submarine's conning tower from 8 miles away. Most revealing was the capture of a damaged British destroyer escort, HMS Opportune, which ran aground on the French coast in May 1943 after a night action. Before her crew could thoroughly demolish the vessel, German technical teams boarded her and discovered intact radar equipment in her operations room. Fregattenkapitän Hans Meckel, a radar specialist, led the examination team. His report, classified most secret and delivered directly to Admiral Dönitz, contained devastating conclusions. The radar system recovered from HMS Opportune operates at approximately 10 centimeters wavelength. This represents a revolutionary advance over the meter wave systems we have encountered previously. The equipment is compact, powerful, and capable of detecting submarine conning towers at ranges exceeding 8 kilometers in moderate sea states. Periscope detection is possible at 3 kilometers. More critically, this radar operates on frequencies completely outside the detection range of our Matok's receivers. Our U-boats have no warning they are being detected. Based on antenna design, characteristics observed on Allied vessels photographed by our reconnaissance, we assess this radar is now standard equipment on most British and American escorts. Conclusion: the tactical advantage U-boats have enjoyed through Matok's early warning has been completely negated. Allied forces can detect our boats while remaining invisible to our detection equipment. Surface operations are now extremely hazardous. Submerged operations are compromised by periscope detection capability. Dönitz read the report at his headquarters in Berlin. According to his aide, Korvettenkapitän Günther Hessler, his son-in-law, the admiral sat in silence for several minutes before speaking. If this assessment is accurate, we are blind men fighting men with sight. How did we not know of this development? The answer lay in a catastrophic intelligence failure. British and American scientists had indeed developed the cavity magnetron, capable of generating centimetric wavelength radar, in 1940. By 1941, the technology was being fitted to escort vessels and aircraft. By 1942, it was standard equipment. For over a year, The Allies had possessed a technological advantage that German intelligence had failed to detect. Kapitän zur See Ludwig Stummel, head of German Naval Intelligence's technical section, later admitted, "Our agents reported new radar installations, but we interpreted them as refinements of existing meter-wave systems. Our own scientists assured us that centimetric radar required equipment too large and power-hungry for shipboard use. We believed our scientists and dismissed evidence that contradicted their assessments. The revelation spread through the U-boat force with the speed of a deadly contagion. Commanders who had previously dismissed detection incidents as bad luck now understood they had been operating against an invisible enemy. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Korvettenkapitän Werner Hahn, one of the most aggressive and successful U-boat commanders, wrote to a friend after receiving the technical briefing, "We have been hunting while being hunted, fighting while blind. Every surface transit, every periscope observation, every attack approach, all conducted while the enemy watched us on their radar screens. The wonder is not that we are losing so many boats, but that any of us survive at all." The statistical impact of centimetric radar became clear when U-Boat Command analyzed patrol results from late 1942 onward. The data was horrifying. January 1942, before widespread Allied centimetric radar, U-boats sank 427,000 tons. 37 U-boats operated in Atlantic. 3 boats lost. Loss rate, 8%. January 1943, after Allied centimetric radar deployment, U-boats sank 203,000 tons. 91 U-boats operated in Atlantic. 9 boats lost. Loss rate, 10%. May 1943, full Allied radar dominance. U-boats sank 164,000 tons. 123 U-boats operated in Atlantic. 41 boats lost. Loss rate, 33%. The mathematics were crushing. In May 1943 alone, fully 1/3 of operational U-boats were destroyed. The primary cause: Allied aircraft and escort vessels equipped with centimetric radar could find U-boats faster than U-boats could find convoys. Oberleutnant Helmut Mansek, a signals officer who survived the war, later explained, "Before centimetric radar, a U-boat could surface at night to recharge batteries and run at high speed with reasonable confidence. The Matox receiver gave us warning if aircraft approached. After centimetric radar became widespread, every surface transit was potentially fatal. Aircraft could find us before Matox detected anything. Escorts could track us in darkness and fog. We became prey, not hunters." Werner Hahn returned to sea in July 1943, commanding U-230 on what would be his final patrol. The orders from U-Boat Command reflected the new reality: minimize surface operations, use schnorkel when available, maintain maximum submerged time, attack only when tactical situation is overwhelmingly favorable. These instructions represented the complete inversion of U-boat doctrine. The vessels had been designed as submersibles, fast on the surface, slow and limited underwater, not true submarines. Forcing them to operate primarily submerged negated their fundamental advantages. Hahn's patrol lasted 41 days. He achieved 1 confirmed sinking, a straggler from a convoy, torpedoed at night in conditions of poor visibility that prevented Allied air cover. The rest of the patrol was a desperate game of hide and seek, with U-230 spending up to 20 hours per day submerged to avoid radar detection. In his war diary, Hahn's entries traced the psychological toll. July 15th. Detected convoy through hydrophone contact, unable to achieve attack position due to strong escort presence. Radar contacts prevented surface pursuit. July 22nd. Aircraft attack while schnorkeling. Depth charged. Minor damage to hydraulics. How did they find us? The schnorkel exposure is minimal. August 3rd. Forced to submerge 6 times today due to aircraft contacts. Battery capacity critically low. Must surface tonight to recharge despite risk. August 8th. Surfaced at 0200 hours. Charging batteries. Lookouts reported aircraft at 0240, crash dive. Depth charged for 90 minutes, pressure hull cracked near stern, taking water, must return to base. That final entry marked the end of Hahn's career as a U-boat commander. U-230 made it back to Saint-Nazaire, but her hull damage was severe enough that she required 3 months of repairs. By the time she was ready for service again, Hahn had been reassigned to a training command. He would never return to operational patrols. In a letter to his wife, written in October 1943, Hahn reflected on the technological revolution that had defeated him. I captured 6 ships and was decorated for my achievement. I believed I had mastered the art of U-boat warfare. Then I encountered an enemy I could not see, could not fight, could not even detect. They watched me while I operated blind. It was not cowardice that brought me back defeated, it was physics. We are operating with World War I technology against World War II science. The result was determined before I left port. The full extent of Allied radar capabilities became apparent to captured U-boat officers who were interrogated after their boats were sunk. The intelligence they provided painted a picture of technological dominance that German researchers had barely imagined. Kapitänleutnant Hans-Joachim Schwantke, commanding U-43, was captured in July 1943 after his boat was sunk by depth charges from a British escort group. During interrogation at the HMS Killarney POW facility, his captors showed him the radar plot that had tracked his submarine. In his post-war memoir, Schwantke recalled the moment. The British intelligence officer laid out the radar tracking chart. On it, I could see U-43's entire final patrol, every surface transit, every course change, even the approaches to 2 convoys that I had aborted due to heavy escort presence. They had watched us continuously. They knew where we were before we knew where the convoys were. The officer, a young lieutenant commander, said to me, "Captain Schwantke, you are an excellent submarine commander. Your tactics were sound, your crew's performance exemplary. But you were attempting to fight with a blindfold while your enemy had perfect vision. It was never a fair contest." Other captured officers provided similar accounts. Oberleutnant Herbert Werner, executive officer of U-230, who survived when Hahn was rotated to shore duty, was captured in April 1944. His interrogators explained that Allied escort vessels could now detect a submarine at periscope depth from over 3 kilometers away. They showed me photographs taken through periscopes by their anti-submarine training schools, Werner later wrote. The images showed U-boat periscopes at various ranges. Then they showed me the radar displays perfect contacts at ranges where visual detection was impossible. They had technological superiority so complete that our tactical skill was irrelevant. The psychological impact of this technological disadvantage spread beyond individual commanders to the entire U-boat force. At submarine bases in France, morale collapsed as crews prepared for patrols, with the knowledge that the enemy could detect them before they could detect targets. Bootsman Wilhelm Müller, a diesel mechanic on U-758, kept an illegal diary that captured the mood. June 1943. Return from patrol. Saw nothing except aircraft that forced us down 6 times. No attacks made. What is the point of these missions? July 1943. New commander gives briefing about Allied radar. Says they can see our periscope. If true, how do we attack? The whole premise of submarine warfare is stealth. September 1943. Preparing for patrol. Obermatt Schultz said Allied radar can detect our schnorkel. So we cannot surface, cannot run submerged with schnorkel, cannot attack convoys. What exactly can we do? The experienced men shake their heads. They know this is suicide. German attempts to counter Allied centimetric radar were too little, too late. The Naxos radar detector, introduced in mid-1943, could detect centimetric radar, but its range was shorter than the radar's detection range, meaning Allied aircraft or escorts detected the U-boat before the U-boat's Naxos receiver detected the radar. Radar-absorbent coatings applied to schnorkels and periscopes reduced but didn't eliminate radar returns. Radar decoys, intended to confuse Allied operators, proved ineffective against experienced radar crews. Every German countermeasure was a tactical refinement fighting against a fundamental technological advantage. Fregattenkapitän Wolfgang Luth, one of Germany's most decorated U-boat commanders, addressed a group of new submarine officers in November 1943. His speech, recorded by one of the attendees, was remarkably candid. "Gentlemen, you are about to enter a war that has fundamentally changed. When I began operations in 1939, U-boats were hunters. We possessed advantages in stealth, mobility, and surprise. Today, we are the hunted. The enemy can see us when we cannot see them. They can detect our periscopes, our schnorkels, our surfaced boats, all with equipment we cannot detect and cannot effectively counter. You will go to sea in excellent vessels, with fine crews, and you will do your duty. But understand this: tactical skill and courage are no longer sufficient for victory. We are fighting a technological war with inadequate technology. Many of you will not return. That is not defeatism, it is mathematics." The statistics of the radar war told a story of increasing Allied dominance and German helplessness. Aircraft kills of U-boats, 1942. 37 U-boats sunk by aircraft. 1943. 134 U-boats sunk by aircraft. 1944. 61 U-boats sunk by aircraft, lower numbers due to fewer operational boats. The 1943 figure represented a more than threefold increase, directly attributable to widespread deployment of airborne centimetric radar. Allied aircraft equipped with ASV Mark III radar could detect surfaced U-boats at night, in poor visibility, and through cloud cover conditions that had previously provided safety. Kapitän zur C. Adalbert Schnee, commander of U-boat Flotilla 9, compiled a detailed analysis in February 1944 that quantified the radar disadvantage. Allied detection capabilities versus German detection capabilities. Allied centimetric radar detection range of surfaced U-boat, 8 to 12 kilometers. German Naxos radar detector warning range, 2 to 4 kilometers. Time advantage to Allies, 4 to 8 minutes. Allied centimetric radar detection range of U-boat periscope, 2 to 4 kilometers. German visual detection range of escorts, 1 to 3 kilometers, conditions dependent. Time advantage to Allies, 1 to 3 minutes. Conclusion. In all operational scenarios, Allied forces achieve detection superiority. U-boats are operating with a guaranteed disadvantage that no amount of training or tactical skill can overcome. By late 1943, U-boat command was forced to acknowledge that the technological balance had shifted decisively against German submarines. The tactical revolution, represented by centimetric radar, had achieved what depth charges and convoy escorts alone could not. It had broken the U-boat force's ability to operate effectively. Admiral Dönitz, in a conference with Hitler on November 1, 1943, presented the grim reality. Mein Führer, the U-boat war has reached a crisis point. Allied radar technology has negated our tactical advantages. Our boats can no longer surface safely to recharge batteries or pursue targets. Submerged operations are compromised by their ability to detect our periscopes. Aircraft equipped with this radar have sunk 134 U-boats this year alone. We continue operations to tie down Allied anti-submarine forces and maintain pressure on their convoy system. But we are no longer winning the tonnage war. We are losing it. Unless we can achieve radar parity with the Allies, the U-boat force cannot regain effectiveness. Hitler's response, recorded by stenographers, revealed his disconnection from technological reality. Admiral, the U-boat remains our most important weapon against Britain. Continue operations. Our scientists will develop countermeasures. The enemy's technological advantage is temporary. German ingenuity will overcome it. But German ingenuity couldn't overcome a 3-year technology gap. Allied radar had evolved from meter wave to centimetric wavelengths, while German research remained focused on incremental improvements to outdated systems. The cavity magnetron that enabled centimetric radar was a revolutionary breakthrough, not an incremental advance. Germany lacked both the component and the theoretical understanding to replicate it quickly. Korvettenkapitän Günther Hessler, Dönitz's chief of operations, later wrote, "By late 1943, we understood that radar had transformed submarine warfare as completely as the submarine itself had transformed naval warfare in World War I. We were fighting with obsolete concepts against an enemy who had moved to a new paradigm. Our continued operations were no longer militarily effective, they were politically necessary." Werner Hahn's capture experience became increasingly ironic as the war continued. In February 1943, he had captured 6 Allied vessels through superior tactical position and the psychological advantage of surfaced U-boat presence. By August 1943, such captures were impossible. Allied merchant crews knew that U-boats could no longer safely surface. The psychological balance had reversed completely. In a post-war interview, Hahn reflected on this reversal. "I captured 6 ships because I could surface with impunity, present overwhelming firepower, and force surrender without combat. 4 months later, surfacing was suicide. The technological advantage that allowed my captures the U-boat's ability to control the surface engagement had been taken away by radar we couldn't detect. I often think about those 6 captures. They represented the peak of traditional U-boat warfare. Within weeks of my return, that style of warfare became impossible. I had achieved success in a dying paradigm." Hahn spent the remainder of the war at training commands, teaching new U-boat officers tactics that were increasingly irrelevant to actual combat conditions. His students went to sea with knowledge of classical submarine warfare, surface pursuit, torpedo geometry, convoy attack patterns, only to encounter an enemy whose radar made such tactics obsolete. Oberleutnant Hans-Joachim Krug, trained by Hahn in late 1943, later wrote, "Kapitänleutnant Hahn taught us to be hunters. He described his capture of 6 vessels, the precision and confidence of surface operations. We absorbed these lessons eagerly. Then we went to sea and discovered we were not hunters but prey. The first time an aircraft appeared without warning and drove us under with depth charges, I understood that everything we'd learned was historical curiosity, not operational doctrine. The final statistics of the radar war demonstrated the completeness of Allied technological victory. U-boats commissioned during the war: 1,163 U-boats lost, 785. Cause of loss: aircraft attack. 245, 31%. Cause of loss: surface vessel attack. 246, 31%. Combined losses to radar-equipped forces: 400, 91, 62%. Nearly 2/3 of all U-boat losses were attributable to forces equipped with centimetric radar. Without this technology, Allied anti-submarine warfare would have remained dependent on visual detection, sonar contact, and chance encounters methods that German submariners understood and could counter. The human cost was staggering. Of 40,000 men who served in U-boats, 30,000 died, a 75% casualty rate, the highest of any service branch in any nation during World War II. They had fought with extraordinary courage and skill against an enemy whose technological advantages made their sacrifice strategically meaningless. Kapitän zur See. Erich Topp, one of the most successful U-boat commanders who survived the war, later provided the most eloquent summary. "We were superb submarine officers, operating excellent boats with well-trained crews. We understood ocean tactics, torpedo ballistics, convoy formations, escort patterns. We were professionals who had mastered our craft. But we were fighting with World War I tools against World War II technology. The Allies possessed radar that could see through darkness, fog, and storm. They could detect our periscopes at ranges where we couldn't detect their vessels. They could track us from aircraft when we thought we were safe." The 6 vessels Werner Hahn captured in February 1943 represented the last gasp of classical submarine warfare. By April, centimetric radar had made such operations impossible. We continued fighting for 2 more years, but we were already defeated. The mathematics were inescapable. Allied radar detection range, 8 kilometers. German radar detection range, 0 kilometers. We couldn't detect their radar at all. That 8-kilometer gap was unbridgeable. It killed 785 U-boats and 30,000 men. In the operations room at U-boat headquarters on May 8, 1945, the day Germany surrendered, Admiral Dönitz stood before the situation map showing remaining U-boat positions. Of the 150 boats still at sea, he had ordered them all to surface, contact Allied forces, and surrender. According to witnesses, Dönitz traced his finger across the Atlantic chart, following the convoy routes where his U-boats had once hunted freely. His final comment, recorded by his aide, captured the technological revolution that had defeated his force. They beat us with factories, and they beat us with physics. The Americans built ships faster than we could sink them. The British and Americans developed radar we couldn't detect or counter. In the end, we were fighting an enemy who could see us while we were blind. Kapitänleutnant Hahn captured 6 vessels in February 1943, using tactics that had worked since 1939. By April, those tactics were obsolete, rendered impossible by technology we didn't know existed. That 2-month gap between his success and his failure measured the distance between warfare as we understood it and warfare as it had become. We can train courage, we can teach tactics, we can build excellent machines, but we cannot overcome fundamental technological disadvantage. That is the lesson of the U-boat war. The side with better detection wins, regardless of how brave the other side might be. Today, only a handful of Type 7 U-boats survive as museum pieces. U-995 sits in a German museum. U-505 is displayed in Chicago. They stand as monuments to technological obsolescence, weapons systems that were state-of-the-art in 1939, but completely outmatched by 1943. For Werner Hahn, who survived the war and lived until 1983, the memory of capturing 6 vessels remained the defining moment of his service. In his final interview, given 6 months before his death, he reflected, "I have had 68 years to think about those 6 captures. At the time, they seemed like the triumph of training, skill, and tactical excellence. Now I understand they were something else entirely, the last successful application of obsolete methodology before technology made it impossible." Within weeks of my achievement, the war had changed. The Allies deployed radar we couldn't detect. My success became impossible to replicate. Other commanders tried surface captures and were sunk by aircraft that appeared without warning. The technology gap made heroes of some of us and killed the rest. The lesson I took from the war is not about courage or tactics. It's about physics. In modern warfare, the side with better detection, better targeting, better information always wins. The brave men in obsolete equipment will lose to average men with superior technology. That's not a comfortable truth for military men, but it's truth nonetheless. I captured 6 ships. The radar that made such captures impossible captured 800 U-boats. Which force was more effective? The story of U-boat commanders discovering Allied centimetric radar is ultimately about the transformation of warfare through technology. It marks the moment when electronic detection became more important than human observation, when physics trumped tactics, when the equation of battle shifted from who trains harder to who sees farther. Werner Hahn had mastered traditional submarine warfare so completely that he could capture enemy vessels intact through the threat of force. Within months, that mastery was rendered irrelevant by radar operating at wavelengths his equipment couldn't detect. The skill remained, but the context had changed. The 785 U-boats lost during the war were not defeated primarily by braver Allied sailors or better tactics. They were defeated by cavity magnetrons generating centimetric radar waves that revealed submarines while remaining invisible to German detection equipment. It was physics, not courage, that determined the outcome. This reality shaped post-war naval development across all nations. The lesson of the U-boat force was clear. Technological advantage in detection and targeting matters more than any other factor in modern warfare. Nations invested billions in radar, sonar, and electronic warfare recognition that the side which sees the enemy first usually wins. For the 30,000 German submariners who died in the Atlantic, Arctic, and Mediterranean, this technological revolution came too late to save their lives. They fought with extraordinary bravery, using equipment that was fundamentally inadequate against an enemy whose scientific advantage was insurmountable. Kapitänleutnant Werner Hahn was not a man easily surprised by the sea. He had studied its tempers, memorized its moods, and from the conning tower of U-122, he had come to believe that mastery of the ocean belonged not to those with the largest fleets, but to those who understood silence, geometry, patience, and the heartbeat of sonar pulses in the dark. In February 1943, he proved this truth 6 times. 6 Allied merchant ships fell to his tactical brilliance, each sinking crafted not with luck, but with deliberate cunning. Hahn would later write in his logbook that hunting convoys was less like war and more like hunting thoughts. He read the ocean for patterns, searched for gaps in escort sweeps, and struck under cover of storm, darkness, and radio silence. He was admired even among U-boat veterans, not because he sank the most tonnage, but because of the elegance of his decisions. He was, by every measure, one of the best. And then, in April 1943, everything changed. Off the coast of Iceland, in heavy seas, Hahn detected a small Allied convoy. Weather was poor, perfect for ambush. He ordered U-122 to periscope depth, expecting the usual hours-long game of patient approach. But within minutes, without making a sound, his submarine was spotted. Evasive maneuvers, depth charge alarms. 5 explosions, then 10. They fell with uncanny precision, not random, not predictive, directed. The convoy was hunting him. There was no radio intercept, no visual spotting, no careless periscope glint. And yet, the enemy pursued as though they held a map with his submarine's exact position marked in ink. He survived the attack, barely. But in that moment, Werner Hahn understood something far more devastating than any: depth charge. The war was no longer about seamanship, it was about physics. Allied scientists, names unknown to U-boat crews, faces invisible, working in rooms far from the sound of the sea, had given the convoy a weapon far more powerful than torpedoes: detection. First came HF, DF, high-frequency radio direction finding. Then came improved sonar. Then came centimeter-wave radar capable of spotting a periscope in the dark from miles away. Then came code breaking, information integration, long-range patrol aircraft, ley lights, and hunter-killer groups guided by intelligence, not guesswork. For the U-boat force, it felt like magic. For the Allies, it was simply science meeting production. Werner Hahn later explained it with brutal clarity. We were fighting men. They were fighting with numbers, machines, and information. Courage had not vanished. Skill had not diminished. German crews were still among the best trained in the world expert navigators, disciplined torpedo teams, masters of stealth and ocean warfare. But by mid-1943, they were no longer just fighting destroyers and corvettes. They were fighting radar. And radar does not feel fear. Radar does not grow tired. Radar does not misidentify shadows in waves. It simply sees. That is the final lesson of the U-boat war. In combat between brave men with obsolete tools and average men with superior technology, physics determines the winner. Always. The U-boat force learned this lesson at a cost of 785 submarines and 30,000 lives. Over 70% of all submarine crews lost to war, the highest casualty rate of any major military branch in modern history. They died not because they lacked bravery, but because they lacked detection. They lacked data. They lacked modern tools. They were fighting blind against an enemy that could see. Their story stands as a warning to every military force in every era. Technological advantage is not a luxury, it is survival. The battlefield rewards not only the strongest or the boldest, but the side that sees first, understands fastest, and acts with the clearest information. A submarine is a weapon of stealth, but stealth without information is not invisibility, it is blindness, and the moment your enemy sees while you remain blind, your war is already over. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, it would mean a lot.